If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast. Tonight's guest is Shawn. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, it's great having you. Thanks for your time. Shawn, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
I'm a 42-year-old, kind of a woodsman, I'd like to call myself. I'm from Vancouver Island, but I currently live in Alberta. And yeah, grew up in the woods as much as I possibly could be, and less over the years just because of work. But definitely love the outdoors and love nature.
Well, nothing wrong with that. That's where all the fun stuff is, out there in the woods. What's been the strangest thing that you've seen in the woods that didn't involve a Sasquatch or a Dogman?
Let's see. I guess it's kind of random, but one day we were in the woods on a big plateau overlooking the ocean, and a huge pod of orca whales, about 20 or 25 of them, started feeding on some school of fish, but it was pretty surreal to watch for sure. Definitely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, very few people see that sort of thing. And if you grew up on Vancouver Island, when you were a kid, did your parents let you just head out into the woods and explore and you had to be back by dinner time? Or did you grow up with parents that were more helicopter parents that wanted to keep you around all the time?
Oh, yeah, we were gone off on our pedal bikes from whenever we wanted to leave for most of the day till it got dark half the time. So we might come back for some lunch when we wanted to. But yeah, we had free reign to go off into the woods. And we lived on an acreage that attached to more woods and a river and a mountain and everything. So pretty neat way to grow up.
Yeah, I'd say so. That's what I was about to say. Wow, what a neat way to grow up. That would be great. I can only imagine the things I get into out there. I've always wanted to live on Vancouver Island, so I'm really jealous. I really am.
Yeah, it was really neat. We used to do tons of mountain biking. We do ocean sports out on sailboats and speedboats, and yeah, tons of hiking, anything to do with rivers and fishing, and always exploring in the woods for sure.
Wow, that's a great time. When you were spending all that time out there in the woods with your buddies, did anything ever happen that you think might have been Sasquatch related or Dogman related, but you just didn't realize what you were dealing with back then?
Possibly. I didn't really know much about the idea of Sasquatch, and definitely not Dogman when I was a kid. The biggest thing we had was black bears and cougars. So kind of, I just would have assumed that if there was some commotion in the woods by something big, when I was young, I would have assumed it would have been a bear or a cougar. And we usually would have just steered clear of the area, but didn't have any direct, anything that I would now look back and say was probably a Sasquatch or Dogman as a child.
Oh, well, that's good then. Now that you know that Sasquatch and Dogmen are definitely out there, do you, in a way, wish that you knew about that back then, so you wouldn't have headed into the woods, or are you glad you didn't know, so you were able to get all these great experiences?
Oh, yeah, I think I'm glad that I didn't know, although who knows if I'd had a decent experience, like my Sasquatch experience that I had before as an adult, a young adult, and then also my Dogman experience that I had relatively recently. Neither of them really scared me that much. So I think it is either way. It's however it was meant to be is how it's meant to be. But now knowing how prevalent they are, I wouldn't have been surprised at all if they've seen me or they've been around. They probably just never bothered us.
Oh, I'm pretty sure that's almost a given that they've seen you quite a few times, probably more times than you'd be comfortable with, but yeah, you're still here. No trouble, no problem. So, yeah, that fits. That's how it normally goes. Now, do you have any kids, Shawn?
I do. I have two little boys. They're 8 and 10.
I see. 2 boys, 8 and 10. What are your thoughts on allowing them to head into the forest the way you did when you were a kid and just explore and have fun? Do you let them do that unsupervised, or do you allow them to head into the woods, but only if you're there.
Yeah, it's a lot different these days. Just my wife especially is a bit more strict, maybe a bit of a helicopter mom. I'm a bit more relaxed, but definitely they're city kids. They've been raised in town. So we have a small acreage that we go to and we do activities, and they enjoy being outdoors, but they're not, wood smart the way that we were. They didn't grow up exploring without their parents. So yeah, we definitely don't give them anywhere near the kind of freedom that we used to have.
How times have changed. I know when I grew up, and apparently when you grew up, that's all you wanted to do was just go out and explore and be away from home. Spending time in the woods, that was priceless. But yeah, kids nowadays, all they want to do, it seems like, is just sit in the house and play video games. So, like I said, how times have definitely changed. From what I understand, you built a tree cabin for your kids. Is it in the woods pretty close to your home, or is it a fairly good distance away?
Well, it's actually at an acreage, which is about 40 minutes away from where we live. So we live in a small town, and then we own an acreage about 40 minutes away where we just do recreation, things like ATVs, and I'm setting up a zip line in this cabin and stuff for them out there.
Oh man, that sounds like a great time. Have they spent the night in that cabin yet, that tree cabin?
Yeah, we've done a few sleepovers there.
I'll tell you what, if my dad would have built a tree cabin for me, I wouldn't have known what to do. I would have been beside myself. I'd say your kids have it made. They sure did hit the lottery when it came to passing out dads.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it was my little boy. It was his 3rd birthday when we took him out and showed him the cabin that I already had basically 95% built, and they just helped me put the last finishing touches on it.
That's all right. That really is. Considering the fact that you've had both a Sasquatch encounter and a Dogman encounter, how would you compare and contrast the two? What it's like to encounter a Sasquatch compared to a Dogman?
Well, I think just because of the situation of how startled I was when I had the Sasquatch encounter, just the fact that I was asleep and it was in the dark and I couldn't see you at the start of the sighting, I was probably more scared by the Sasquatch sighting. And then the other factor is that I'd also since listened to so many podcasts of yours about Dogmen. So I think a lot of my fear factor was kind of lowered when I had my Dogman encounter. So, I mean, totally different animals or creatures, but different situations.
Well, I'm glad you didn't really freak out, and I'm glad you weren't traumatized by the Dogman experience. Thank goodness for that. But understand, there are a lot of people who have Dogman encounters who have listened to the show. That didn't stop them from being traumatized, very traumatized by their experiences. So I'm just glad that how your encounter played out, it didn't traumatize you. And speaking of which, let's get to that now. Please tell us about that encounter, giving us every last detail that comes to mind.
All right, so I was on Vancouver Island and when it happened, and I have a car hobby. So a part of my car hobby is old Buicks and vehicles. And so because of that, while I was walking in the woods one day, I found an old vehicle, and I had already kind of scoped it out a previous time. So I knew that I could probably take a few parts off of it. And it's not like stealing. This is an abandoned vehicle that was, in the bush for years and years. So it's not like anybody would mind. But anyways, what happened was I put a jack under the car and I jacked it up. And when I went to get the jack underneath the car, I saw a deer, and the deer had been dismembered. So it kind of looked like its arms all 4 of its legs had been pulled out of the sockets, and it was just neatly lined up. So all 4 legs, the torso, the head was kind of up near the top, but still attached to the torso. And it was as if someone or something had pulled the arms and legs out of this deer and stashed it there for storage almost. So obviously I got pretty spooked when I saw that. So I just wasn't thinking Dogman at the time. I was thinking maybe cougar or something. But even then, thinking back, I don't really think a cougar could really dismember a deer that particular way. But anyways, I just kind of figured I'd get out of the area. Some sort of predator was there, so I stood up and I started walking away. And as I was walking away, it felt like I was kind of being flanked by some sort of something in the woods. I didn't really know what it was. And so this kind of went on for a little while as I'm walking away from the situation. I could hear something kind of not too close, but not too far away, maybe 20 yards away. But I couldn't really see what it was. Once in a while, I could see a flash of a bit of brown, a bit of color, but I definitely couldn't make out what it was. And that continued for quite a while as I walked out. And you could hear it crunching branches. Definitely something had to have been something fairly large, but I still didn't know what it was until eventually it basically came out from behind a tree and showed itself to me. And it was like your textbook kind of dogman up on its hind legs and showing me its teeth and kind of snarling at me a bit. But for some reason, it just didn't seem as scary as maybe I was just more prepared for it than most people, being that I knew they existed. Still a bit scary, but not. He was fairly far away. It just didn't seem really quite as mean as he was trying to make himself look, was my thought.
Well, that's still close enough. That's still pretty close. 20 yards when it comes to these guys feels like 2 feet in most cases. So I think we would describe that situation differently, apparently. Please describe him for us. I know you say he was a textbook dogman, but please take your time now and from top to bottom, please tell us about his appearance as accurately as you can.
Sure. So kind of almost like a German Shepherd kind of face, head, nose, pronounced nose, long pointy ears, obviously big snarly teeth, very jacked, like very muscular, big shoulders, very strong defined arms, nasty claws, big long, not fingernails, but real claws. I'm pretty sure it had 5. I believe it had 5 fingers. It appeared to have claws on them. And yes, it was standing upright. I couldn't tell if it had a tail or not because it was facing on to me. But yeah, definitely very muscular, a little bit of a thin waist, muscular legs. The legs sort of had those, well, it's a canine type leg that looks like it's bent backwards sort of thing. And yeah, he was kind of snarling at me, just kind of showing me his teeth. But for some reason, I wasn't quite as scared as I probably should have been.
That's really hard for me to understand. Here you had this dogman about 20 yards away from you, snarling at you, and he looked the way he did. But you weren't that frightened. What do you attribute that to?
Honestly, I think it was just I'd listened to almost all of your Dogmen podcasts over the years, and I mean, except for there's odd ones where someone shoots one or something, and then they have an altercation. But most of the time, it just seems like they just really enjoy scaring the crap out of people.
Yeah, normally they do, but that doesn't preclude the chance that you might get hurt. I mean, there are deviant dogmen out there that will kill you if they get the opportunity. That's obviously once in a blue moon. It's not the norm, but they are out there. So, yeah, the fact that you're able to deal with that so well without it moving the needle all that much, that really does come as a surprise. But that definitely beats you being traumatized by the experience. So, thank goodness for that.
Yeah, I feel like I knew that at that point when it was kind of snarling at me a bit, I felt like if it was going to get me, it already would have. I just kind of felt like, okay, it's just going to show me, it just wants to scare me at that point. I didn't feel like it was more scary when he was kind of flanking me and I couldn't see him very well. You could kind of see the outline of something. I think that was more scary because I wasn't sure, when or if he was going to come after me or anything. I mean, I'd had bears charge me before in the woods. I used to do forestry surveying and stuff, and that can be very scary when you don't know where they're, whether they're actually going to attack you or if they're just trying to scare you. It can be unnerving for sure.
Oh, it sure can. Yeah, definitely. When you've been charged by the bears like that, like you said, how would you compare the fear that you felt in those cases compared to when you were face to face with that Dogman?
I don't know. I guess just differently. Maybe my experiences over the years have sort of hardened me up. Just between bears and people in life, and just I'm not a scared youngster anymore. I guess definitely just a whole different situation. Same with comparing the Sasquatch sighting to the Dogman Encounter. They're just totally different categories. And same with the bears, I think.
Well, like I said, thank goodness it didn't traumatize you. We'll take that all day long. How far was it from where you encountered that Dogman back to your truck or your car?
How far back was it? Probably about a mile.
A mile. Did you get the impression that it followed you all the way back, just part of the way? What impression did you get on that?
As soon as he showed his teeth and kind of snarled at me, I just kind of didn't really give it I looked at it for a second or two, and then I just continued walking, and then I didn't really hear it after that. I think it just left me alone.
Well, thank goodness for that. Was that Buick actually in the woods or just on the edge of the woods?
It was in the woods. There'd been some overgrown roads. It was old logging roads that used to be opened up, so people, it could have been a stolen vehicle or a broken vehicle, hard to say, but people would have probably drove it out the logging roads maybe 30, 40 years ago, and then it got overgrown ever since.
Yeah, that would explain how it got there. It doesn't sound like you got the parts you went there, well, you didn't go there looking for the parts, but it sounds like you didn't get the parts that you wanted to get off of it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I definitely never went back to that vehicle.
I can understand why. Did you ever have any thoughts about trying to go back to get those parts?
Not particularly. It wasn't. It was much more appetizing to order something on the on the computer or to go to a junkyard in town.
I understand. I don't blame you at all. You also told us about that mangled deer that you found. Do you think the Dogman made its presence known to you because you focused your attention on that deer the way you did, or for some other reason?
Yeah, I think it was one of those. I think that the Dogman realized that I had basically found the deer, and they were just kind of being protective over their hunt or their kill. I think I've heard a few similar situations of people that were hunting themselves, and a Dogman kind of like claims their deer, or Dogman has their own deer and kind of gets a bit defensive over it. So I think that's all it is.
Yeah, just might be right about that. Did the deer look fed upon?
No, not at all. I wanted to talk a bit more about that. So it appeared like the arms and legs, or I say arms and legs, they're all four legs, had been just pulled out of the sockets. It didn't look like they were chewed in, nibbled off or nothing. It just looked like they were yanked out, which most other animals couldn't really do. I can't picture a deer. I can't picture a bear doing that. I can't even picture a cougar doing that. You'd almost need to have hands, like a Dogman, or obviously a person wouldn't be strong enough to do it, but I believe these Dogmen are strong enough to pull the legs off of a deer.
Oh, they sure are. Yeah, it's hard to imagine the strength they have. They can definitely do that. Do you know if that area is known for any Sasquatch encounters happening?
Well, it's hard to say because there's so much folklore about Sasquatch on Vancouver Island. So there's a mix between the legend and reality that I'm not sure how much people even talk about it in the, people, there's mountains called Sasquatch Mountain and things like that, but it's hard to say where reality starts and where the legend starts, I guess, or legend ends and the reality starts. So I don't know how much activity or sightings have been identified in that area, but it's definitely prime habitat.
Oh, no, I believe it. I'll bet it is. Well, now that we're talking about Sasquatch, let's talk about your Sasquatch encounter now. Please give us all the details about that.
Sure. So that one was, it was in a place called Hinton, Alberta. And Hinton it's kind of a mountainous area and very touristy, tons of beautiful rivers and stuff. It's very similar to Vancouver Island kind of area, as opposed to like the prairie areas of Alberta. Very lush green mountainsides. So anyways, I was doing solo camping. So I had a pickup truck with a canopy topper on the back. And I had a bed set up in the back of the truck. And I'd had a campfire and drank some beers and stuff. And then I was sleeping in the back of this truck. But I didn't have any flashlight or anything handy because I had no real, I planned on sleeping until the sun came up. And so I had no need for having a flashlight beside me, I didn't think. But what happened was at about 2 a.m, I was deep asleep and I was awoken by basically stomping. Something was stomping so loud, so hard on the ground that it was shaking the whole truck. So as I was sleeping, I woke up to this thump, and it was kind of a bipedal thumping that was getting closer and closer to my truck. And so, I mean, I had heard of Sasquatch, but I didn't necessarily not believe in them, but I definitely never seen one. So my thought was maybe a moose stomping on the ground or a bear, but I didn't really know why they would be stomping. And so, anyways, once whatever it was got close to the vehicle, it was sniffing at the vehicle, and I did have some food in the vehicle, in the back of the truck with me. And so, long story short, eventually, I could hear the animal breathing, or the creature breathing, and its lung inhalation and exhalations took so long that I figured the lungs have to be huge on whatever this thing is. So anyways, it then carefully just walked away. No more stomping, no more shaking. It just walked away. I couldn't even really hear it leave, but you couldn't hear the breathing anymore. So as soon as I could hear that it wasn't, or couldn't hear it breathing anymore, I jumped out of my sleeping bag, jumped out of the back of the truck, hopped into the cab of the truck, turned it on, and turned the truck around 180 degrees to leave the area. And what happened was, when I turned the truck around, in the headlights, I could see the Sasquatch going into the woods, but he was still pretty clear to see. And he kind of looked back at me like an old patty over the shoulder look, and then went off into the bushes. So I was safe in my truck, and the Sasquatch was gone into the woods, but it was definitely pretty scary.
Well, I bet it was. Can you describe that Sasquatch for us?
Yeah, sure. So I went back the next day to try to get a benchmark of the height based on the trees and stuff. And I estimated it to be somewhere around 9 to 11 feet tall. So definitely a big boy. And he would be kind of like your conehead style Sasquatch, because I know there's a few different variants. And he was not overly muscular, but definitely very big. And yeah, like long fur, or not fur, hair, hands down close to the knees, swinging its arms while he walked. Definitely huge, but not jacked up like the way the Dogman was.
I bet that was a sight you're never going to forget, and understandably so. Do you think all that stomping was just an attempt on the Sasquatch's part to get you to leave, or do you think it was done for some other reason?
Yeah, I think it was probably just to scare me off, I think. I can't think of any other reason why he would do it.
Yeah, that's probably what it was done for. You're probably right. You said that you went back the next day to look for evidence and just have a general look around. Did you go alone or with someone?
Yeah, I went alone, but I felt comfortable just because it was daylight and close to my truck, and I wasn't too scared to go back to the area, but it was very hard ground, so there was no tracks or evidence, but I was able to kind of park the truck where it had been located, and then that way I could just kind of look off to the same distance to kind of compare the heights of the trees, just to get an idea of where I thought that where it must have been for height-wise, and it probably was at least 10 feet, but I can't, obviously I can't prove that, but I'd definitely say, 9 to 11 feet tall. And it was a male. When it kind of turned, I could see some male parts.
Yeah, so he was definitely a big boy. Well, it's about time for us to get out of here, Shawn, but before we do you have any closing comments you want to put out there for us?
No, I just wanted to encourage people to keep going out in the woods and documenting their stories and raising awareness to this, because there's still so many people that have no idea that it's a real thing. They just think it's a folklore. And just wanted to thank you very much for your time and your efforts. And you're doing an amazing job documenting and supporting the people who do have traumatic experiences.
Well, thanks for the good words. I wouldn't have it any other way. But having said that, thanks again so much for coming on and sharing the details of those experiences with us. I really appreciate it and hope you have a great night.